Okay. Well, good morning and welcome to Thursday morning Bible study as we continue our study of the Gospel of Mark. And we are going to jump right in, chapter 9, where we left off with the story of the Transfiguration of Jesus. So, who would like to read today? Nobody wants to read?
I can start, but I'll start for as long as I can.
All right. So we're going to be at verse 2 if you read from verse 2 to 8.
Okay. The Transfiguration of Jesus. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And as his clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach them. Then Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He hardly knew what to say. They were so terrified. Then a cloud came, casting a shadow over them. Then from the cloud came a voice. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus alone with them.
Okay. Amen. All right. So, first impressions. Nobody has any first impressions?
I have an impression. I was wondering why can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Why he took him up? Why?
Why didn't he
Took
take
him
all
apart.
12? He only took the 3.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
he says he took them up one at a time.
No, he takes them all up together, Peter, James, and John, but he leaves the other 9 disciples behind.
Oh, okay. I misread. Yeah. Go on.
Okay. But I mean, it's an important insight though that there's Peter, James, and John. Does anybody remember another story where there was only Peter, James, and John?
When the healing, weren't the 3 of them at the healing of, who was it, Peter's mother-in-law?
They're there at the healing of Peter's mother-in-law. And then there's another story. The healing of the little girl.
Of the little girl.
Remember, and they think she dies, and he only brings Peter, James, and John in with him.
Right.
And now here he is.
Together, right? Weren't those 2 healings close to each other?
Yeah, they're not far from each other, but they're 2 separate events. The healing of Peter's mother-in-law occurs at the very beginning. It's one of the first miracles of Jesus. And then the healing of the little girl. And now here at the Transfiguration. So what does that say to you?
Maybe it's a special group. Jesus, yeah. He looks at them as the potential leaders once he's gone.
Yeah, so there are some kind of leaders within the leaders, right?
Right.
And do you remember anything about at the very beginning, Peter, James, and John? Around the boats? They're the first disciples.
James and John came to Jesus first, and then they came and got Peter.
Well, okay, no. You have to remember we're in the Gospel of Mark, so that's the Gospel of John, that story. But when Mark tells the story, how does he engage Peter, James, and John at the very beginning?
Was that when they were fishing and I might be getting my gospels mixed up, but was that when they were out fishing and they got their fill of fish?
Yeah, that's not quite that. They are fishing. Remember, he's walking along the shore and he sees Peter and his brother Andrew in a boat, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he calls to them and says, I will make you fishers of men. And so Peter and Andrew leave their nets. And then along the way, he sees James and John and their father. Who's their father? Zebedee, right? And he calls to James and John, and James and John leave their father Zebedee and join him. So Peter, James, and John are the first disciples of Jesus.
Right.
We don't know whatever happened to Andrew. Maybe Andrew just didn't make the cut. But it's clear that Jesus has a special relationship with Peter, James, and John. So it's a good first impression to see that it's not all 12 disciples. It's just those three. Other first impressions?
So we have Peter with this vision, right? He's seeing this, but nobody else is seeing it but Peter, right?
Why would you think only Peter saw it?
Because they kind of looked at him like he was crazy.
Well, where do you see that?
Okay, so maybe I'm reading into it wrong. He hardly knew what to say. They were terrified. So maybe they all did see it, and that terrified all of them.
Yeah, there's no reason to believe that they didn't all see it, because first of all, in verse 2, he was transfigured before them.
Okay, yes.
And then the verse 6, he hardly knew what to say. They were so terrified. So yeah, there's every reason to believe they all had this experience. What do you think of the experience? What do you think about the event?
I think they're in disbelief. I think I think there's a little shock going on, especially in view of the fact that Moses, Elijah are dead. And here Peter's talking about building tents and all this other stuff. I think they were so confused and terrified and upset. Peter was just saying anything to try to make some sense out of what was going on.
Okay.
And I disagree, because I think that they were terrified, but I think that at least Peter really thought they were there. I don't think at least Peter was in disbelief.
Well, I'm kind of
like a weird vision, but
I'm kind of thinking that we already established that we think that these guys are the most trusted guys out of the 12. These are the ones that Jesus trusted. So Jesus is trusting them. He's coming to the point where I think I can trust these guys. So he's opening up a little piece of himself to them. I do believe that Jesus is letting them in a little bit, and they're overwhelmed with it.
Right. And I would like to add, if I may, that by Elijah and Moses appearing, this establishes a connection with Peter, James, and John, who are already Hebrews, they're already Jews. This kind of solidifies who Jesus is, because he is connecting with our one true God and the God of the prophets and of Moses.
But he's also,
so it establishes they're on the right track.
Yeah, but he's also, to me, giving them a glimpse of who he is, thinking that maybe they're ready to see the real him in a little bit, a little bit, like he gives us a little bit, and we're still not grasping the whole thing. So they're kind of bewildered of what they're seeing, but God is trusting them with this little bit of information that he's giving them. So Jesus is trusting them.
Is it possibly like he's preparing them, because these are always the three,
right?
That he may be bringing them into some type of preparation for what is to come.
And he is trusting these three. He's trusting these three with this little bit of information. Otherwise, he would have brought everybody else in. I think that you three are ready to see a little bit of really what's going on and what I'm preparing you for.
Okay, so
I think they were.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I just think they were witnesses in the fulfillment of what the law would be.
Okay, well, I was going to ask you if you think they're ready to see something. What is he showing them?
He's gonna.
Is he showing them like his divinity of who he is?
Yeah.
And could he?
Resurrection.
You know, he
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
I just said that showing them who he really is. He is. I mean, who is he that he can be seen with talking to people who are dead? Who is he? I mean, he's showing them all kinds of other miracles, and now he's showing them that he can speak to the dead. That these people are dead.
I think
You have to wonder if
still struggling. I
if
think
he
they're
had.
still. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish.
I think they're still struggling with who Jesus is, but now they can see how he is going to appear in glory.
Yeah. You know, the other thing is it's who did come back. Like Moses established the law, but Elijah was a prophet. Is Jesus somehow trying to connect that he is the fulfillment of the law, and all these prophets have been, you know, talking about his coming? That's kind of like a connection for me.
And the other thing that we need to pick up is that Elijah and Moses both, there's no grave for them either. You know, they were taken, well, we know Elijah was taken up. But we don't know if Moses was, because, you know, Moses is left, the people have gone on, but it's never, you know, it's never for sure. So here they both appears with Jesus. That has to mean something. You know, that definitely means something. Father Richard's smiling up there because you got something going on in your head.
Okay, can I? But my question is, did Jesus plan this, or did the Father plan it? Because it looks like the Father is revealing who Jesus is, and so was it something that they decided together was going to be done? Was it something that the Father decided this is a good time, I would let them see who my son is? So that's my question.
Well, we said the same thing. Like you saying that the Father's instilling a little bit. I think Jesus is who's Jesus? God, Son, Holy Spirit, whoever. He is entrusting this little bit of information to these three people, and they don't know what to make of it. They don't know what to make of what they saw.
No, I'd say they don't know what to make, but I'd still feel like, even though Peter don't know what's going on, but he's just wrapped up in it and he's fully engrossed in it and wants to make these tents because he really thinks that they're there with him.
Peter's one of these people that got to say something. You know, you got to say something.
Yeah. See, that's kind of what I was thinking. They were so shocked, terrified, overwhelmed. Peter had to say something. So what would it be? Okay, let's pitch some tents.
Yes.
Okay.
You don't know what to say, but you got to say something.
Right.
I'm a little kinder to Peter.
Let's start now going back and focusing. You should all be very proud. This is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. This is what I mean by first impressions, right? You just begin brainstorming of all the different things you see in the story. You know, you don't have to have the answers just yet, but obviously you're all starting to see different things and ask different questions and wonder why it's this. That's exactly what you're supposed to be doing in Bible study, right? Don't just take the story on its face. Start asking it questions. Why is it Peter, James, and John? You know, what did they see? Why is it Elijah and Moses? all of those kinds of things, because that's what it means to talk to the text, to start asking it questions and everything. So now let's go back and let's do it as we do, verse by verse, and see what we can learn from the way Mark tells us the story. Because remember, we always want to stick with the way Mark tells us the story, because often we start reading things into the story, and that may not be what Mark is telling us. So let's go back. So we started, as Reggie pointed out, with Peter, James, and John. So right away, we know that these are three special people. We're not sure exactly why, but we've seen this trio with Jesus before, with the other healings. We know that they were the first disciples that Jesus called. So Jesus does have a special relationship with these guys. We know later in time that Peter, right, will become the one on whom Jesus builds the church, right? James, this is James the elder. James, who will become a significant apostle. He's the one, remember, that I took the Camino to go see in Spain. And then John is considered the writer of the Gospel of John. Okay, so that's who these three guys are. And he leads them up to a high mountain. Now, he leads them up, right? So it tells you Jesus is up to something, right?
Right, Jesus is in charge of this.
It's not necessarily clear that he's in control of everything, but Jesus leads them up. Remember back in this gospel, it's because we heard it last week, the Holy Spirit drove Jesus into the desert.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there you can see that God was doing it, right?
Right.
It didn't say Jesus decided to go into the desert. It said the Spirit drove Jesus into the desert. But here, Jesus leads them up. So Jesus is making some choices here. And he goes up a high mountain. Now, remember, whenever you read about a mountain in the Bible, what kind of should come to mind?
Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai, and why Mount Sinai?
Because of Moses.
That's where God was.
That's where God was. Yeah, mountains in the Bible tend to mean that something about God is going to happen there, right? So pay attention whenever you see a mountain, because it gives you a hint that something's going to happen. And so, as Dee say, the most famous mountain, of course, is Mount Sinai, and that's where Moses meets God and receives the 10 Commandments, right? There's a debate as to which mountain this is. So, wait a minute. I have to. Did I share that? No.
No.
Wait a minute. Here you go. All right. You see that now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. It's not clear where they are. The last we heard, they were in Caesarea Philippi, up here. And if they're still up in Caesarea Philippi, then they're probably here in these mountains here, and that's where Mount Hermon is. Okay, so there's one theory that this is taking place up here in Syria on Mount Hermon. The other theory is that they're actually back in Galilee, and there's another little mountain down here called Mount Tabor, where my cursor is. And so that's the other theory that there in Mount Tabor. I've been to Mount Tabor when I was in Israel. It's really just like a big hill. I mean, it's not much of a mountain. But I mean, it's higher than everything else, but it's certainly not like a Mount Sinai. But it's you know, it's what they had in Galilee. But we don't know exactly where this is taking place. So it's either of those two places. But again, it's more the idea that it's a mountain. Okay. Now, he was transfigured. What does that word mean?
His figure changed.
He was changed.
Changed.
Okay. So what do you mean his figure changed?
I mean, he was changed in appearance, I guess.
He was changed in appearance.
Yeah, or altered in some kind of form.
Or his
outwardly
was changed, right? But why did they say transfigure as opposed to transform?
Maybe he was changing from human.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know. In the Greek, the word is metamorphosis.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, that's the actual word used in Greek. See, that's highlighted there. Any of you who can read Greek, and I'm sure all of you can read Greek. Where have you heard the word metamorphosis?
You know, when a caterpillar change, you know, from a caterpillar to a butterfly, you hear that a lot.
Yeah. Now, it's fascinating because there's different ideas here that we're putting forth, right? Who said his figure changed, which means he changed in appearance?
I did. I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Changed.
If he changed in appearance, did he actually change himself?
No.
No.
He was recognizable. He's still like a butterfly. I mean,
he didn't change inside. He was just outwardly visible.
Okay, it was an outward appearance, right?
Right.
So that's out there. You know, is this just a vision, or did something really happen to Jesus? Right?
Father Rich, couldn't, you know, we talk about Jesus after the resurrection having a glorified body.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And when I look at this, well, I don't see it now, but it says he was white or whatever, you know, so white that the fuller or whatever couldn't make him any whiter. But it's like he changed into something more beautiful.
Okay, well, be careful.
It's
his clothes that become white, not him.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still recognizable. You know, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Like the caterpillar changing into the butterfly, a whole different appearance. His clothes changed, but he was recognizable as the same person these three normally see, except that his clothes became dazzling white. What does that mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And as opposed to being more beautiful, I see it more as being more brilliant. So they.
Oh, did we lose somebody?
Yeah.
Could it also be that it is a temporary? It wasn't permanent.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's different things. So, did he change in appearance, which would have been more like the words that we use, transfiguration, because it implies that only his figure changed. If we would use our word metamorphosis, that would imply a deeper change, right? Mm-hmm. Because as Dee said, when a caterpillar undergoes metamorphosis and becomes a butterfly, it really changes, right? It's more than just its appearance. I mean, it changes. But
that change is also permanent. He's not going to change back from a butterfly back into a, you know.
Yeah, and that
It's
and that
permanent.
exactly, and that idea of metamorphosis, the way we use the word, implies that it's a permanent change, as opposed to the transfiguration, which may be more an apparent change, but it comes back.
Could
So
he have been more like a spirit at that moment? He was transfigured because when he led them up the mountain, he was totally human. And then when he was transfigured, he became more spirit-like as was Elijah and Moses. And then when this appearance or this event was over, he went back into his fully human or physical self.
okay. Yeah, I mean, again, yeah, as you know, I like to do. I raise all this stuff. I'm not sure I know the answer to it, but what I probably am fairly confident is that the change he's undergoing, whatever it is not the same as his resurrection. Okay, because the resurrection was a permanent change, right? So when he ultimately had a glorified body, it was his forever, right? So at best, he may have appeared as though he was in a glorified body, right? But he wasn't yet in the glorified body. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because again, once Jesus was raised from the dead, he was transformed into a glorified body, and he to this day retains that glorified body. It didn't go back to the way it was before. So I think that's all the reasons why when we translate it into English, we use the word transfigure as opposed to transform or metamorphosis, because I think there's something about this change that is not quite the same as ultimately his resurrected body. The debate that still continues in my mind is, again, was it a change that only was in appearance, which means Jesus himself would not have been changed by it. He only appeared differently, right? It's like, you put on different clothes today, you appear different, but you're not different. Or did Jesus himself undergo some kind of a change? We'll come back to that question, but that's going to be a big debate about this event and what we mean by the word transfigure. What and who and how were things changed? Is it just an appearance, or did something actually change?
Something, now, let me say this before we go on. Something actually did change, because he had to make some kind of change to get from where he was on the ground to be lifted up to talk to these two icons that they know of.
Oh, where'd you see lifted up? Where's that?
I didn't. I'm imagining.
Yeah, you're adding that into the story.
Okay. Okay, these two people appeared. Okay, they appeared. So he had to have some kind of change in order for that to happen. So something has happened to him. I think he did make some kind of change from his mortal self to something to be an immortal self, sort of, so that he can converse with these two people. They were conversing, and we know that. That says that. I didn't take that out of context.
No, you're right.
So there is a change in him, and how he changed, but he did not change so much that Peter, James, and John didn't recognize.
Okay.
It could have happened, but it didn't.
Okay, I mean, and that's all possible, but that is all going to come down to how you interpret the word transfigure and the word appear, because you can also say appearance is what we're seeing. That's what we see, that we see what appears to us. Doesn't actually mean we're actually seeing what's there, right?
Oh my goodness, Father Richard, you sound like people on court. We got a video, and we saw the man beating the man. We didn't see the man beating the man. That's what you said. We didn't see what we actually saw on that camera.
Well, it'd be interesting if there were a camera, would it have picked up the same thing?
See, you know you're talking to a lawyer, okay? Remember that. He's a
Remember
lawyer.
that, yeah. But that's why we like to play with words. So, you know, appearance is an important word, right? So that's always, I love those questions. If you really had a video like today's video camera, would it have picked up the same thing they were seeing? Why could you say that? I mean, why can I legitimately say that what we as humans see might be different from what a video camera would pick up? Why would I say that? Why can I say that?
Well, that's because what we see is part of who we are.
And
you
who,
know,
right,
and everybody has their own vision of what's going on.
Well, and who can affect that in this story?
The other thing is that our memory is clear as a camera. We may see it, but don't remember every part of what we saw from my own experience.
Okay, well, what I would also,
but it looks like God is the one. Well,
yeah, I
that
mean,
really sees what's going on.
That what I'm getting at is that when, you know, we're human beings and we have a spirit, and God can come into our lives and give us an experience that he can't give to a movie camera. And so when we see things or when things appear to us, it's not necessarily simply because our eyes are technically seeing it. It's our souls and our spirit are having an experience that we're interpreting, you know, visually, but we might not actually be seeing it. And so, you know, not to say it's a ghost, but, you know, when people have said that they've had experiences of a loved one appearing to them, right? I believe that that's a very real experience, but I bet you if there were a camera in the room, it probably wouldn't pick that up.
Right.
Because the camera isn't human, and it's not using all of the human senses that we have to discern what's happening. The camera only has the lens. So if it doesn't change in front of the lens, the camera can't pick it up. But as humans, as humans, we can experience and encounter a lot of things well beyond just what our eyes see.
And I believe you're right. We can see things, but I've never had an encounter that my husband saw the same thing I saw. These three people saw the same thing.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And if I come to you and say I saw Father Miller, and you're not going to see him the same time I see him in the same room. So you know, this is special. That all three of them had this whatever in front of them. Apparition, whatever. They had it in front of them.
Why is this special? What is going on here that makes it different from anything else so far that we've seen?
To me, well, I see it as being special. I mean, I see this like a coronation, maybe, you know, and it is because of the voice saying, "This is my beloved son."
Okay, and who is saying that?
The voice being the voice of God. This is my beloved son. That's what makes it so very special for me. Yeah. It's an announcement. It's telling them. It's part of letting them know.
Okay.
It's identifying Jesus around.
Okay, great. So to me, what I would say is, if you ask who is the primary character in this story, it's God. Okay, God is the one who's making this story happen. And God has at his disposal abilities that even Jesus doesn't necessarily have. Right?
Yes.
So God is orchestrating this event, is what I would say. And that's why, to me, and you joke because I'm a lawyer and everything like that, but that's why it's not clear to me that we can be sure exactly what's happening. Because this isn't something Jesus is doing. This isn't something Peter, James, and John are doing. It's not even something Elijah and Moses is doing. this is a God event. God is up to something here. And in theology and in the scriptures, we have a word for this, and it's called theophany. Let me see if I can, I don't know how I can put that. It's Theophany. So theophany, Theophany. And it literally means a God appearance. Theos, which is Greek for God, and phani, which is actually like where we get epiphany, which is manifestation, appearance. So a theophany is an appearance of God. This is a God event. God is the one who's making his appearance in the story. And so what a camera would pick up might be very different from what we as humans might experience in this event. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So that's why it's fun to play with these things, because this is an event that we'll never really wrap our minds around, because this is a God event. God's the one who's in charge of this event. So we can only speculate as to what's going on. But Mark gives us some cues. The idea that it's his clothes that become dazzling white indicates that Jesus himself might not have changed, but what was his outer appearance is what may have changed. So let's move on. Elijah and Moses. What are the significance of Elijah and Moses? Why would these two be there?
Okay, they're significant because they both were leaders in the Jewish history.
Okay, so they are very prominent people in the Jewish story, no doubt about that. Let's start with Moses. He's the easiest one. Why is Moses remembered?
Moses he gave the law.
Yeah. Moses is symbolic of the law, right? It's God gave the law to Moses. Okay, and we know such a significant part of the Bible is the law, Torah. The first five books of the Bible in Hebrew are called Torah, the law. Okay, Elijah. Who or what does Elijah represent?
The greatest prophet?
The prophecy?
It's the prophets, yes. It's not necessarily that Elijah is the greatest of prophets, but why might they have picked Elijah and not Isaiah or Jeremiah or?
I believe he was next to Moses. He was the prophet that God talked to the most. He was the prophet that brought them the first king. So,
I'm not so sure about that. It has something to do with, I think, Dee, what you said earlier.
Yeah.
What does Elijah and Moses have in common?
They're
the Old Testament.
Well,
yeah.
they're both Old Testament, but
All the prophets are Old
what about their
He was
story?
taken up. He wasn't buried. He was taken up.
Yeah. So Elijah was the only prophet that was taken up to heaven. So,
Right.
So there's a sense that he might not have died, or, I mean, if he dies, we certainly don't have a grave for him.
Right.
Moses, we kind of know that Moses died, but we don't know anything about where he's buried or anything like that. So there's a sense that maybe Elijah and Moses are still living in a way that the others are not.
Okay,
And that might have become why Elijah gets picked to represent the prophets. Moses gets picked to represent the law. What I missed something?
Oh. You know what you just said reminded me of the movie Star Wars. When Obi-Wan Kenobi never died, he shows up at the end to help them out.
Yeah, well, That's an important motif in
Yes.
human experience, right? Are these people are still alive and around us? So if Elijah represents the prophets and Moses represents the law, in Judaism, what is the significance of the law and the prophets?
I'm confused.
Okay, the law is what we live by. I'm
Law
just throwing this
tells
out
you how
there.
you're supposed to live.
Right, and the prophet tells you, prophesies. It's a spokesperson for God about a prophecy, and Jesus represents the prophecy. Sort of. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's right. In the Jewish mind, at least, the whole relationship with God is law or prophecy. It's one or the other.
Right.
Right. So the law is how we live our lives, right? What the laws that Jesus gave, and the prophecies is how we engage God. You know, how God speaks to us, and how we kind of stay in line with what
Right.
God wants. Right. Remember,
Right.
prophecy is not really about predicting the future. Prophecy is really about maintaining our relationship with God, making sure we're doing all that God is asking us to do. So with Elijah and Moses, they really represent all of Judaism, you know, everything that has come before. And now Jesus is engaging all of what comes before. All right. So what does that tell you? That Jesus is in conversation sort of with the law and the prophets.
So if Jesus is in conversation with the law and the prophets, he's in conversation with God.
And with God in what way? And God, with how God revealed himself. Through whom? Through what?
So God is revealing himself through Jesus.
Jesus.
Well, no, but how God first revealed himself?
When he revealed himself in the garden to Adam.
Well, it's really how God has revealed himself in the Jewish Testament.
Okay.
So the first thing you have to realize is that this is reaffirming that Jesus is a Jew. Okay, Jesus is coming out of the Jewish tradition. God is not abandoning, the Old Testament, so to speak. That Jesus is coming from the Old Testament. He's in conversation with it. So God isn't starting, like throwing away the Old Testament and starting it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something Christians often forget. We think God started a new religion in Jesus, and he didn't. Okay, the religion started in Judaism. Okay, Jesus comes out of that religion. Jesus is in conversation with that religion. Right? Jesus is going to move it forward into a new understanding, but God is not abandoning Judaism.
Right. Father Rich, is that the significance of the cloud in Hebrew scripture, how the cloud moved with the Israelites and all of that? Because God could have appeared, said what he wanted to say, and that could have been it. But it says a cloud came, cast a shadow over them.
Yes. And again, just like the mountain, when you hear mountain, you should think something's going to happen, because again, in the Hebrew scriptures, things happen on mountains, right? Same thing with the cloud. These are Jewish imagery that's being used. The Gentiles wouldn't have used that imagery, to understand God. Their God, they would have had wings or something like that, right? Because their gods flew around, those kinds of things. But right,
Well,
the cloud is how God appears in the Old Testament. So he leads them out of Egypt, right? When Moses goes up to the mountain to receive the Ten Commandments, what comes down upon the mountain? A cloud comes down upon the mountain. All right. So yeah, these are all reinforcing Jewish ideas. And one of the really important things, as I said, for Christians to remember is we come from Judaism. God has not abandoned Judaism. So for a Christian to be anti-Semitic, is like to hate themselves. It's to hate our ancestors, because this is what we come out of as a religious people. Now ethnically we might not be descendant ethnically of the Jews, but certainly religiously and out of faith we are the heirs of the Jewish tradition.
Father Rich, I have a question then. Why is it that we believe that Jesus came down, he was real, he was here, he died on the cross, he came back, and they're still waiting for him?
Well, and then that's again, that is ultimately then how did people accept or reject the message of Jesus? Okay, so but it doesn't, the mere fact that we accept the message of Jesus and then allows for a transformation of our faith through it doesn't negate what came before us. Okay, so we still, and I hope you've learned as we've gone through these Bible studies, you're constantly going back to the Old Testament, right, to understand what's happening in the New Testament, because they're related, and so the Old Testament is still valid. It's still, the promises of God in the Old Testament are still good. It's just that we see them fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Not everybody has done that. So and that's going to bring you more about this whole idea of transfiguration, because if Jesus is one, right, with the Old Testament, with the law and the prophets, what else might be changing here?
Repeat that question, please.
If Jesus is in conversation, and unity with Moses and Elijah, meaning the Old Testament, what else might be changing other than just Jesus?
The interpretation of the law.
Right. Yeah. Our understanding of what God is up to, or what God was up to in the Old Testament, that just might be changing as well. All right, so that this transfiguration isn't just about what is happening either in the appearance or even in the figure of Jesus. It's also a transfiguration or a transformation of how we understand the Old Testament.
Thank you so much, guys. I have to miss you now. I really want to stay.
Okay, well, we'll be taping, so we're video, it'll be recorded.
Thank you.
All right, good luck.
Bye, Valerie.
Bye, Val. All right, and to push that a little bit further, what does the voice say?
Listen to him.
Listen to him. Okay.
Yes.
Now, there's two things we want to point out about this. All right. The first is, when was the last time you heard "This is my beloved son"?
At his baptism.
At his baptism. Now, let's go back real quick to see if that's really what you heard at his baptism. All right. Who wants to read verse 11?
And a voice came from the heavens, You are my beloved son. With you I am well pleased.
So how is that different from what we just read?
He's speaking it to Jesus himself.
At his baptism.
Yes.
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 He's speaking it to Jesus.
So at the baptism, the voice speaks to Jesus.
But he's also identifying Jesus.
You are my beloved son.
Right.
With you I am well pleased.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else hear that?
No. No. He didn't say that. No.
Yeah, we're not really sure. It's interesting. What Mark tells us is on coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens being torn open and the Spirit like a dove and descending upon him. Jesus sees it. It doesn't say they saw it.
You know, Father, you're right about that because, you know, we didn't read that right. Because John didn't hear it. Otherwise, he would not have sent two of his disciples to ask Jesus, is he the one to come?
All right, well, wait a minute. Now you're mixing up your gospels.
We're not mixing up the dots.
You're mixing up your gospels. That's the Gospel of John.
Well, he would not have sent those two disciples.
Well, what John saw and what he knew, based on what he puts in his gospel, might be different from what Mark knows and puts in his gospel. So from Mark's perspective, from the stories that Mark has heard and he's recording, this first event, it really does like that only Jesus saw the heavens open and the Spirit come upon him. And only Jesus heard the voice that says, you are my beloved son. With you I am well pleased. Right?
Right.
Now, in this story, then a cloud came casting a shadow over who?
Them.
Then from the cloud, the voice came and said, what?
This is my beloved son.
Listen to him. So who's hearing this?
All of
them.
Yeah, presumably Peter, James, and John are hearing this. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that this voice is now speaking to Peter, James, and John, not to Jesus. Okay, and then the whole idea of listen to him. Let's do this. Deuteronomy 18:15. All right, so in the Deuteronomy, in this part, I think this is Moses, right, is kind of giving his final, one of his speeches to the Israelites. And he says this. Who wants to read that? That's highlighted, verse 15.
A prophet like me will the Lord your God raise up for you from among you your own kindred.
Among your own kindred.
That is the one to whom you shall listen.
Okay, so remember we said that Moses had told the people to look for the prophet.
This is a prophet, like.
Well, he's saying a prophet, but remember when we were doing, like, who do people say I am? Some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, some say one of the prophets, right?
Yeah.
Jesus was none of them, right? Because Jesus is the prophet. Jesus is the prophet like Moses, who the Lord our God will raise up from among your own, right? He's going to be Jew. He's going to be a Jew. He's going to be Jewish. That is the one to whom you shall listen. Okay. So now when God says, this is my beloved son, listen to him. That is the fulfillment of Moses's prophecy, right? This is the guy. This is the prophet to whom you are to listen. So what's happening to the covenant of God that is in the Old Testament expressed by the law and the prophets?
It's being fulfilled.
It's being fulfilled. Okay. So in essence, this is a scene in which God is communicating that everything that came before is now being fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And now listen to him, because now pay attention to what's going to happen next. Are you with me?
Yes, everything leads to Jesus.
Okay. So as I said, what is it, just Jesus who's being transfigured before them?
Not really. Sounds like God is trying to prepare these disciples for what's to come. And he's revealed this to them so that they can maybe feel more confident moving ahead and knowing what they're going to face. Listen to him. So he's kind of demanding. He's making that demand of them.
Yeah, it's a demand. It's a command, right?
Right.
Listen to him.
And you said, I guess the transfiguration has happened to all of them. Because you can't have a God experience and not be changed.
All right. So now you got Jesus changing. You've got God's relationship to the people through the Old Testament changing. And what else did you have changing, Dee?
You got Peter, James, and John. They have been changed.
They're being changed as well.
Yeah. And we know that from our own experience. You know, we are changed. We're not who we used to be because we've all had that encounter with God and with Jesus. So they're having an out-of-body experience, and they can no longer be the people that they were before, or think like the people they were before. Very
All
good,
right.
Rich. Very good.
So the story of, so I would say almost this is a little bit of a misnomer to label this the transfiguration of Jesus, because there's a heck of a lot more transfiguration going on than just Jesus, right? So of course this is the editors. This is not in the actual Bible, this thing. So I actually prefer just to call it the transfiguration, because there's a lot of change going on in this story. There's change in Jesus, there's change in the covenant, and there's change in the disciples.
You know, what's so good about Bible study is we would not have gotten this on Sunday morning. I don't think we would have gotten all of this broken out to us like this on Sunday morning.
Well, actually, this is the this is going to be this is the gospel for this Sunday. So you'll see what I have to do with it.
You see what you have to do. But, you know, being a Bible study, we got to, you know, break it all down to understand, you know, kind of like what they are going through. Whereas sometimes maybe you may do it differently, but we've heard this passage many, many times. And it never occurred to me, I don't know about the rest of you, that everybody has had a change in this scenario. That the focus has always been on the change that Jesus has had.
Yeah. And, you know, and again, if you consider that the main character of the story isn't Jesus, who's the main character? God. If you consider that God is the main character of the story, then you can see God is working this transformation among all of these folks.
Mhm.
Okay. Now that gets you back to the original question, and then we'll be done. The original question is, was Jesus himself changed by this? Did Jesus, when Jesus came down from that mountain, was he himself different from when he went up the mountain?
No.
Okay, why do you say that?
Because he was outwardly changed, and it was already determined that he was the Son of God.
Okay, so one, that would be one theory, right? That Jesus only changed in appearance, and he already knew, right, that he was the beloved Son of God, because God told him that back in chapter 1.
Right.
And so this change that occurred was all for the benefit of whom?
The disciples.
Disciples. So this event occurs for their benefit, so that they might know something that they didn't know before. Anybody want to venture into the other idea that Jesus himself was changed by it?
Well, okay, I'll take the bait. I still feel that if his human self has gone through this, then he has to be changed. You got to bring him back to his humanness. Now he's back with them alone, and the experience had to have a profound effect on him too. That now, not only he knows that he's God's beloved Son, now there are others who know the same. So there is something in him that has changed. I don't have this, burden on me by myself. I have others who also know this, and I don't have to walk this ministry alone anymore.
Yeah. I kind of felt he was changed too, because, and emboldened may not be the correct word, but it was confirmation for him from God, not just to him, but to those who were following him. So, we talk once again, fully human, fully divine. The human part of him still had to suffer and go through all of those things. But I think having the confidence that now God has told this to these quote unquote leaders, or his disciples are going to, move forward with quote unquote his agenda, that now he's got to feel, more emboldened, more confident, more confirmed that what he's going to go through is what God wants. So he's not, like Dee said, he's not by himself anymore.
But could it also be that this now makes him even more hesitant, knowing that all these things he's now subject to do and must do? He's now under a spotlight. So they're watching to see any mistakes he make. He's not perfect. If he is in human form, he is not perfect. He's going to make mistakes. But that's a lot to put on a person, that now, you're going to bring everybody out. I'll say out of captivity in the mind. You're opening up a new religion, a new way to go, a new following. I mean, that's a lot. And if he's in human form, like most of us, that's a lot to put on a person and expect him to be perfect. He's not going to be perfect. Not if he's in human form. He's going to make mistakes. And that's asking a lot.
Well, it sure is asking a lot. So I think you could go either way. So you could take Loretta's approach that this is a change in appearance, and that it's more for the benefit of the disciples, so that they get a better glimpse of what really is happening and what's before him, and that God is there to talk to them, right? Because the voice is talking to them, not so much to Jesus. Or you could take the other approach, which is, if Jesus is fully human and fully divine, how could he possibly have undergone, how could his human part undergo something like this and not be changed by it. And then what does that do, right? Does it embolden him? Does it inspire him? Does it demand more of him? I would say all of that. You know, even Jesus needs a shot in the arm every now and then, right? and maybe God had him go through this because if you really look back, what was the last thing that was going on was Jesus was talking about how he was going to have to, you know, be rejected by the elders, and he would be killed, and he would be raised, and you know, no one who saves his life, you know, if you try to save your life, you're going to lose it, and you know, all that stuff. Well, even Jesus needs to get a booster on that. And so maybe this is also God's way of confirming for Jesus that, you know, you heard me once say that you were my beloved son. Now you're going to hear it again, that you're my beloved son. Because presumably Jesus hears this. And you need to know that I, God, have confidence in you, that I'm now telling your disciples to listen to you. So there's a lot to this story, isn't there? Yeah, we just spent an hour on 7 verses. So, any thoughts? Any more thoughts before we call it a day?
Well, it looks
It's
like
still a mystery.
It looks like Jesus has been told how urgent it is for him to get those disciples ready and prepared.
It's still a mystery.
Yeah, and it always will be, won't it?
And again, a story like this is particularly going to be a mystery because remember, God is the actor here. And if when we talk about theophanies, which this is, we will never be able to get our minds around exactly what happened.
What God is up to.
Because we can't figure it out. So the interesting thing, I mean, and someday maybe in Bible study we'll do it. But one fun thing about Bible study is, you know, now this story, the Transfiguration, occurs in all 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they all tell it differently. And what's fun is to watch and see how they tell it differently.
But it confirms that he's his divine son.
But yes, I mean the message, the basic message is there, but they're all understanding it. So in the Gospel of Luke, I remember once when I was studying it, and again by looking at the Greek, the Gospel of Luke would absolutely agree with Loretta that Jesus himself is not actually changed, because Luke does not use the word metamorphosis. He just says Jesus is changed in appearance. And you know, my theory is Luke didn't use the word metamorphosis because he didn't believe that Jesus really changed in it. That he looked his, you know, he appeared to change, but that he didn't actually change. Does that mean Luke knows more than Mark or than Matthew? No, I mean, you know, the Holy Spirit wants us to read all of these stories. So, you know, just because they tell it differently doesn't mean that only one of them is right. You know, it's really, what does God's Holy Spirit want us to learn from the story? So that is the story of the Transfiguration according to Mark. And we will continue with the Gospel of Mark next week, going on to things like, we'll talk a little bit more about the role of Elijah. And then there's going to be one more, I think, exorcism that Jesus does before we really start to now head towards his passion and death. Okay, so we'll pick it up next week.
Okay, thank you.